Mexico wants Trump tariffs could eliminate 400,000 US jobs and vows retaliation. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum stated on Wednesday that Mexico would retaliate if US President-elect Donald Trump followed through with his proposed 25% across-the-board tariff. The Mexican government warned this move could eliminate 400,000 US jobs and increase costs for American consumers. If the US imposes tariffs, Mexico will also raise tariffs, Sheinbaum announced during a press conference, marking her clearest statement yet that Mexico is preparing countermeasures against its largest trading partner. Mexican Economy Minister Marcelo Ebrard, who appeared alongside Sheinbaum, called for greater regional cooperation instead of a retaliatory trade war. This would be self-defeating, Ebrard said of the proposed tariffs, which appear to violate the USMCA trade agreement between Mexico, Canada, and the US. He emphasized that such tariffs could cause significant US job losses, reduce economic growth, and double the tax burden on US companies producing in Mexico. The impact on companies is enormous, he added. The tariffs would hit cross-border automotive exports especially hard, particularly affecting manufacturers like Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis. Ebrard pointed out that 88% of pickup trucks sold in the US are made in Mexico, and their prices could rise significantly. Our estimate is that the average cost of these vehicles would increase by $3,000, Ebrard said, noting their popularity in areas that heavily supported Trump in the election. Later on Wednesday, Sheinbaum and Trump spoke by phone, discussing issues central to Trump's agenda. Trump stated the tariffs would remain until the flow of drugs, particularly fentanyl, and migrants into the US was controlled. On Truth Social, Trump said Sheinbaum agreed to stop migration through Mexico, effectively closing our southern border. However, Sheinbaum clarified on X, formerly Twitter, that she shared Mexico's migration strategy, which focuses on addressing the issue before migrants reach the US border. She stressed Mexico's approach is to build bridges, not close borders. Following these developments, Mexico's peso strengthened by nearly 1% against the dollar in after-hours trading, reversing earlier losses. Analysts view Trump's tariff threats more as a negotiation strategy than a definitive trade policy. The lack of a clear connection between this threat and trade concerns suggest the new president is leveraging tariffs to achieve non-trade-related goals, said David Cole, chief economist at Julius Baer. Automotive industry impact Mexico's automotive sector, its most vital manufacturing industry, heavily depends on exports to the US. It accounts for nearly 25% of all North American vehicle production. Analysts at Barclays estimate the proposed tariffs could effectively eliminate profits for major automakers like Ford, GM, and Stellantis. Investors underestimate how disruptive these tariffs could be, Barclays noted. Trump transition team spokesperson Brian Hughes argued that the tariffs are necessary to protect US manufacturers and workers from unfair foreign competition. Meanwhile, GM and Stellantis declined to comment, and Ford stated it manufactures more vehicles in the US than most automakers. Mexico's Automotive Association, AMIA, said it is preparing for all outcomes, while the Institute of International Finance warned of potential long-term challenges to Mexico-US relations. Increased protectionism and related policies could significantly impact the region, the group said. With the USMCA set for review in 2026, Katia Goya, Director of International Economics at Grupo Financiero Banorte, suggested the agreement might require renegotiation rather than a simple renewal. A trade conflict will lead to lower US growth, higher unemployment, and increased inflation, Goya said. Ebrard emphasized the importance of maintaining strong trade relations. USMCA trade totaled $1.78 trillion in the first 9 months of this year. Mexico seeks unity, not division, he said. In Asia, China criticizes Trump's tariff threat, says it won't solve America's problems. China has denounced US President-elect Donald Trump's pledge to impose additional tariffs on Chinese goods over the trafficking of fentanyl, accusing his administration of shifting blame for America's opioid crisis onto China. Trump, who is set to assume office on January 20th, stated on Monday that he would introduce a 10% tariff on Chinese imports unless Beijing does more to curb the production and export of chemicals used in the creation of the highly addictive narcotic. He also hinted at tariffs exceeding 60% on Chinese goods during his campaign. China's stance against unilateral tariff increases remains unchanged, said He Yadong, a spokesperson for China's Commerce Ministry, during a regular press briefing on Thursday. Imposing arbitrary tariffs on trading partners will not solve America's domestic problems. He urged the US to adhere to World Trade Organization, the WTO rules, and work with China to foster stable economic and trade relations. Trump's comments have ignited concerns over what analysts predict could be an even more contentious trade war than during his first term, which saw tariffs ranging from 7% to 25%, disrupting global supply chains. Howard Lutnick, Trump's nominee for Commerce Secretary and head of the Office of the US Trade Representative, suggested in an October podcast that China is attacking America with fentanyl. He even raised the possibility of tariffs as high as 200% on Chinese goods. Chinese state media editorials this week have warned that new tariffs could plunge the world's two largest economies into a mutually destructive economic conflict. On Thursday, an air of familiarity surrounded Chinese state media as they praised certain US firms for their strong collaboration, a tactic reminiscent of the rhetoric used during the previous US-China trade war. During that time, US businesses and investors monitored Chinese state media for signals about which American companies might be favored or targeted amid escalating tensions. The state-owned Global Times highlighted companies like Apple, Tesla, Starbucks, and HP late on Wednesday, urging US policymakers to respect American businesses' interest in economic cooperation by creating favorable policy environments. The China Daily also noted Morgan Stanley's regulatory approval in March to expand its operations in China, presenting it as evidence of foreign firms' optimism about investing in the country. A Beijing-based American executive reflected on the first trade war, explaining how businesses often relied on media interpretations to gauge potential policy shifts. Neither side was effective at communicating policy directly, so companies had to sift through media coverage to separate signals from noise, said the executive, who spoke on condition of anonymity. Retaliation risks. During Trump's first term, China had threatened to blacklist US companies from participating in Chinese trade or investments through the Unreliable Entity List. The Global Times at the time reported that companies like Apple, Cisco Systems, and Qualcomm could be targeted. However, China largely refrained from implementing the list, reserving it for entities involved in arms sales to Taiwan. Bo Zhengyuan, a Shanghai-based partner at consultancy Plenum, believes Beijing is unlikely to use tools like the Unreliable Entity List immediately after any formal tariff announcements by the Trump administration, citing China's weakened economy. However, retaliation could occur later if Chinese commercial interests are significantly harmed. There was collateral damage during the last trade war, and there will be collateral damage again this time, he said. China warns of necessary action if US escalates. Chip restrictions. China issued a warning on Thursday, stating it would take necessary actions to protect its firms if the US expands its chip control measures. This follows reports that the Biden administration could announce new export restrictions as early as this week. Last week, the US Chamber of Commerce informed its members via email that the administration was considering adding up to 200 Chinese chip companies to a trade blacklist. Being added to this list would prevent most US suppliers from doing business with these firms. At a regular news conference on Thursday, He Yadong, a spokesperson for China's Commerce Ministry, criticized the US, saying China strongly opposes the broadening of the concept of national security and the abuse of control measures aimed at Chinese companies. The US has increasingly tightened its control over semiconductor exports due to concerns that China might use advanced technologies to bolster its military capabilities. These measures severely disrupt the international economic and trade order, destabilize global industrial security, and undermine cooperation between China and the US, as well as the global semiconductor industry, he stated. He further warned, if the US insists on escalating control measures, China will take necessary actions to resolutely safeguard the legitimate rights of Chinese enterprises. Bloomberg reported on Thursday that the Biden administration is weighing additional restrictions on the sale of semiconductor equipment and AI memory chips to China. According to sources familiar with the matter, the new proposal would target fewer suppliers of Huawei than originally planned. Notably, it excludes Changxin Memory Technologies, which is developing AI memory chip technology. The proposed restrictions focus on 2 chip factories owned by Semiconductor Manufacturing International Corp., Huawei's partner, along with over 100 Chinese companies involved in manufacturing semiconductor equipment rather than the chips themselves. As President Biden prepares to leave office in January, concerns are rising over whether President-elect Donald Trump's proposed tariffs on China could reignite a trade war. Trump pledged this week to impose an additional 10% tariff on all imports from China, above any existing tariffs. He accused Beijing of not doing enough to stop the flow of illicit drugs into the US from Mexico. China's Commerce Ministry said on Thursday the tariffs would not resolve US internal issues.